To discern the truth is to go beyond the relative, beyond what is true to me and what is true to you, and to see a larger picture that from your perspective, things seem to be this way, but from another being's perspective, things are very different. For example, a human perspective of reality is, as you know, but the perspective of your cat, the reality is very different. All the objects are larger, clumsy creatures, very slow, very clumsy. And the smells, the tastes, the vision, the reaction, the attention, concentration, and alertness is so much heightened than the way that humans experience their day-to-day living. And how is the reality for a whale in the sea, who sometimes pops out his head above the water, looks around, may see a strange boat with strange creatures running around it. The whale may look around and see the lands in front, but has no idea what's happening there. So when we look at different species on this planet alone, there is probably at least 1,000 different realities, the ways that these beings experience the same wall, the same earth, the same environment in which everybody is. So the experience of species, it can be very different, can be absolutely different reality. Time is experienced very differently for each species. Humans live on average 80 years. A turtle may live well into 100 or more years. A fly can live only a week or two or more. So lifespans are very different. A tree can live 1,000 years, even 2,000. Time is different. Time is experienced differently. Five senses and the senses of other beings, animals, are different. But let's speak today about what is true from a human perspective. And that's where we can touch upon common agreements, that humans agree on some common things for the sake of convenience, or they are subjected to those common ideas for control, for perceptual manipulation, for consciousness limitation. The very first step into duality, into the relative truth, or we can say my truth and your truth, is a divided perception. From a divided perception manifests a certain narrowing of attention and focusing only on specifically that portion of experience and interpreting that portion of experience via the identified subject, me, and what I see, what I perceive. That's where reality becomes relative and subjective. On top of it, often develops unconscious imprints and then subconscious mechanisms and then limited conscious view via experience via the five senses and the conscious mind. Even looking at the same object, such as a tree, one may have a very loving experience. For another, it will remind of something in the past, maybe a sheltering experience. Maybe another one was hit by a falling tree on their head, and that will have a bad memory of a tree. Walking in the park, always be cautious that nothing will fall on their head. If one is in tropics, they should be aware of the coconuts because they are very dangerous when they fall down. When we were in Thailand, we saw a car parked under a coconut tree, and the coconut fell and the whole front window got smashed. Now, of course, if that was your head, you would be certainly in hospital if you're lucky to stay in hospital. So the same objects may have multiple interpretations, associations, meanings. What that means to you, what that means to me. So, what we are dealing with in reality is individual experiences of relative subjective environment, how things relate to you. What do they mean to you? Now let's look from another perspective of collective agreements, such as human history. In the older days, you would go to a school and a library, you would open a textbook, and that's what's written in a textbook. That this happened, that happened. If you are living in America, you would be brainwashed with propaganda that Russians are your enemies in every history textbook. If you're living in Russia, you would be brainwashed by propaganda that Americans are your enemies. They always caused you trouble. And that's right. They always caused the trouble. They always threatened the Russians if you are a Russian. If you're American, that's the way around. Always the Russians were the problem. So that's how all the textbooks were printed. Now we have wider access to information. Now we rely on Wikipedia, written by anonymous editors. Who wrote those articles? Who edited those articles? Now we Google. Who put that information up there? Now, even if we agree that there was a World War II, for example, but to whom it happened? Did people in Hawaii experience World War II? Perhaps some aspects of it. Did people in New Zealand experience World War II? Maybe certain aspects. How about Mongolians? How about Tibetans? How about Greek people? How did they experience that? Everybody's experience was different. To some, it was very bad. To others, it was just something that was happening somewhere else in another country. They never really saw what's going on. They never really experienced. There was no social media to report instantly what's going on. So they just heard that something's going on in the world. And how about to the far remote Indian living in India? They never even heard about World War II. It didn't even happen to them. in a far remote corner, where there's no access to newspapers, television, or some remote inhabitants of Papua New Guinea who haven't even seen Western civilization at all. For them, there's nothing outside their jungle, their beach, their island. Nothing exists. There are actually still some tribes in some Asian places that never encountered foreigners, civilization, and if they would treat them as unwelcome invaders. So they would run with their sticks and try to scare them off. I saw some videos with the precise islands where they still live. So they have no idea about your smartphones and internet. It doesn't exist for them. They still live thousands of years backwards. But this is their present. So even the history of humanity is extremely relative, depending who experienced what. Now, it gets even more complicated. What was the cause of World War II in this example? Who caused it? Or what was the purpose of it? Now, that's where it gets totally wild. Because not only each nationality of people would tell a different story, but how about if we now expand further beyond humanity? And if we have larger awareness and access to galactic data, we would recognize that this World War II, for example, was orchestrated by a single-oriented group of people who controlled both sides. How about that? By the same group of controllers who control both sides. The good side Americans, the bad side Russians, they control them both. And they play the chess game between the countries. So if you analyze all the wars in the world, and if you would have access to the data who actually initiated them and for what reasons, you would say that the mechanics are always the same. Doesn't matter if the war was 2000 years ago between the Romans and the Turks or the Middle Easterners, or if the war is happening right now in Israel and it's so hard to understand what's going on there. Who is fighting with whom? What are the reasons? Yeah, it's been always conflict as long as we know. So the mechanics are the same. So if you have a larger awareness, a deeper access to the data, you will see that the mechanics is the same and it's just repeated. And then the cause, the reason, the meaning behind it, it gets also simplified. It becomes more obvious who is doing what. So if you have a 4D perspective, you will see much more clearly what's going on down below in 3D. If you have a 5D awareness and the historical data, you will see even larger picture of how certain galactic influences are influencing the bad and the counteracting with the good, and what is the purpose. Now that's where it become really biblical. The fallen angels. Who is initiating what? Who is doing what? We go even further into 6D, 7D. What are the reasons of the conflicting energies, of energy distortions, of energy disbalances? What is the reason of the creation of causality? If you go even further up, what is the reason of creation of the universe? This universe. So everything that we experience is relative. It's only in relation to your own personal experience at the end of the day. It's your choice. What do you want to support? Well, there are a few choices, really, fundamental choices. Do you want to support the fear, or do you want to support higher aspect of unconditional love, not the 60s peace love, the higher aspect of unconditional love, which can see through the fear and can see into the deeper nature of a deeper reality. That's where we then transcend even causality. We even transcend the universe. And we recognize that everything is light. Everything is the light of the self, the light of God. And only when the light gets differentiated, split into 7 rainbow colors, for example. So when the light gets differentiated, when the divine light manifests itself into the universe, and then within the universe, everything gets split further down and becomes a reflection, a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy, a reflection of reflection of reflection of reflection, then we start to see the reality. Everything is light of God, and everything you experience via your senses, via your mind, via your inner senses, including your third eye, your astral senses, your etheric senses, your causal body senses, all of these things are relative, meaning subjective, individual. So then you make a choice between fear, which is very popular on earth, and deeper unconditional love of starting to see through those mechanisms, starting to see the deeper reality behind the creation of apparent. And then again, you step one step back. And even the deeper creation, let's say the etheric creation, which can be very beautiful, but still it has limitations because you are interacting in your etheric body, which is wonderful. It's so lighter, it's so brighter, it's more sensual, it's so much more receptive, more expanded. But if you spend 100,000 years in your etheric body, you will get bored and you will say, I want to go into the higher light. Yeah, so even that higher body also has a limitation. So therefore, that is one of the causes of the fall of angels, because now going biblical, even in the Mahabharata or the Indian Vedas, the great wars, and then even in the mystical Gnosis teachings and Sufi teachings and yogic teachings. So as we look at different spiritual traditions, we will recognize that the problem occurred when the limitations were realized by the inhabiting beings. So essentially, as we go higher, things are more aligned, more harmonious. But what was the cause of the fallen angels, for example? What was the cause of creation of duality, of the 3 lower worlds? So in various spiritual traditions, we will find that the causes of the problems have come from a higher place. And what were these gods battling about in the Mahabharata of the Indian Vedas? Why was Shiva and Krishna battling with demons and other entities which are described in great detail? Is there any truth to them? And why did the Christians say of the fallen angels and the good ones and the bad ones and so on? The Gnostic teachings, the Sufi teachings, and the Buddhist teachings of Maya, illusion, and creation of suffering. So you will realize that the cause of these troubles, they come from a certain place above. And thus the freedom is not in a physical sense. The freedom is not in the astral sense, not in etheric sense. The true freedom is returning to the source, to the self, to your true nature. So as we may understand that what is true is relative to the subject, to who asks that question, to how much information you have access to what you already know, to how much connection you have to the higher, to the above. So therefore, the endless political discussions will not liberate you. The historical studies will never reveal you the actual truth. You will always find bits and pieces, breadcrumbs, leading to something even before and encrypted in mythology, encrypted in Egyptian hieroglyphs, encrypted in Sumerian tablets. Just because they're old, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're true. People think that, oh, they're 5,000 years, they must be true. No, they aren't true necessarily, just because they're 5,000 years old. So the same way as Buddha said very well, you have to discern and purify your perception, purify your mind, have a discerning quality, investigative approach, and never trust, even if something has been said for thousands of years, even if it's written in stone of Sumerian tablets, Egyptian hieroglyphs. What if they were written by the winners of the battles? And where is the story of the losers of the battles? And where is the story, the cause of the battle? So when it comes to history, and the history is unfortunately a foundation for the present experience, we still carry on as humanity the Babylonian system. We still carry on the fear agenda, the warring narrative, the divide and conquer mentality, the for-profit attitude, the divide, separate, and control, and abuse and utilize even the very own soil that we walk on. So this has been for thousands of years, and it's still happening today, just in a different framework, because now we live in the modern era. However, the awakening is happening. More and more people are awakening to the deeper truth, or simply a deeper inquiry, and not trusting blindly what is presented to them. But this is only the kindergarten level of the true spiritual inquiry, of the true spiritual enlightenment, of the kindergarten level of the full consciousness realization. So the culmination of inquiry into what is true and what is not finishes, we may say, in the pure consciousness, in the light of the self. And this is the only happy ever after that there is. We were watching a romantic movie some time ago, and the whole story leads to a moment when the couple falls in love and they kiss each other, and that's the end of the movie. That's the happy ever after. When you fall in love and you kiss someone, then you are with someone, but how about the rest of the life? So all of these children's stories, the prince finds the princess, they kiss, and they live happily ever after. Does that sound like reality to you? Yeah, so the same way, uh, the true happy ever after, so to speak, is only the present light of consciousness. And it is not set in time that will happen at the end of something. It is set in the now. So you're not going to find the happy ever after in the future of times, technically speaking. You will only find it in the present. When you go into the light of the self and discern what is actually true, what is actually subjective, causal, objective. And when you come to see the light of the self and realize that that is the only true reality there is, and the rest is a reflection, a shade of it, yeah, a copy of it. So then you do realize everything in between. Then you may answer all the questions to yourself about the history of humanity, about mythology, about the present, politics, if you wish so. Then you see it clearly what is what, who plays what narratives, who has what agendas, what are the causes of these agendas, narratives, perceptual control. So you go back and back and back, one step back, one step back, one step back, and you illuminate that which was veiled. So this is called the process of disillusionment, because you were subjected to the illusion that this is so, that, for example, Sumerian tablets are real and true, and now you realize that perhaps they are not true at all, that somebody wrote from their own perspective for a particular purpose, perhaps to keep controlling humanity. And even in the, for example, Sumerian tablets, it is written Anunnaki, meaning those who came from heaven. Are they good? Are they bad? You can only judge it by what happened when they came. Did they actually help to make peace and love and harmony and resolving the problems, or more problems came after that? So you have to consider all of these things. And many times there are good beings coming to earth with good intentions, but they get screwed left and right. For example, the story of Jesus. He came to earth as an avatar of Christ, as a son of God, and he was persecuted, hunted down, and killed, basically. That's what people do to the Son of God, to the avatar of Christ in the Roman days. Nowadays, things are a bit more open, so to speak. Now the YouTube is banning everybody who speak the truth. So probably this video is not gonna make it to public. Yeah, so at the end of the day, let's summarize that it is your personal experience. And then you ask a question, does it support the fear? And what I can do to support unconditional love? And what can I do to see things more clearly? To recognize the mechanisms that are playing out in my experience. And at the end of the day, in a very spiritually, consciously awakened way, you have no influence over what is happening in Australia right now, unless you live there. You have no influence of what politician will get elected in the United States if you live in UK, for example. So all of these discussions and inquiries are all for purposes of your hobby, really. But what makes a real difference is your inner development of discernment, inquiry, clarification within you, what is actually real, and recognizing what is relatively true and relatively false, and asking even a question behind. So, what is behind this? Is that true what is behind this? And is that true again what is behind that? And I will give you the answer right away so that you don't end up circling around too much. Is the only true happy ever after, or the only true reality, actually is the light of consciousness, the light of the self. And that is wonderful. That is beautiful because we don't end up in a dump. You end up at the end of it all, you end up in the light of God, in the all love, all bliss, all harmony and peace reality. So that news is great, actually. The journey is not easy. The journey requires you personally to disillusion, to inquire very deeply, close. But you are getting better at it day by day, week by week, month by month. So I'm giving you the very last answer of it all. Light of consciousness, bliss, divine love, eternal peace is what is at the very end of it all. At all inquiries of what is true, what is false, what is pain, what is pleasure, what is joy, what is sorrow, what is happiness, what is misery. At the end of all of these questions, what is real? Do I exist? If you do them correctly, diligently, with some help, if needed, and mostly is needed, you will come to the pure light of consciousness, divine love, eternal bliss. And you only have to further inquire, what is my perception that is limiting this experience of bliss? What is my perception that is limiting my experience of eternal bliss? These are some final questions. These are some of the last questions that you ask. So I hope this paints you a good picture, and knowing where it truly leads, where is the true final destination available in the present, always in the present. It has always been here, the bliss. It is, and it will be. It's not gonna go anywhere. Don't worry. This divine love is not gonna go anywhere. It has been for countless trillions of years. If you have any fears about that, will I ever get there? Will it ever happen? It will. Don't support the fear. That's what I told you already before. Don't support the fear. So do your job, do what is necessary to disillusion, disidentify from limitation, and at the deeper level to double check your perceptions so that you gain more and more abidance in this eternal bliss.